Thank you for joining us as you prepare for your R06 exam. Brand Financial Training have been around since 2007, helping exam candidates like yourself to pass their CII exams with our exam resources and support written by highly experienced authors who also have experience marking CII exams. We've been providing a comprehensive analysis document for R06 for well over 10 years now, so we have a lot of experience in interpreting the case studies for R06 and predicting the questions that are most likely to be asked in the exam. Case study analysis documents are seen as an essential part of the revision process and can really help maximise your chances of passing. We've seen the exam evolve over the last 10 years, so we are in the best position to help you prepare to pass. The entire team here at Brand Financial Training genuinely cares about you and your exam journey. We want to know how you're doing and how we can help, with our aim being to make your exam journey with us enjoyable as well as successful. We know from feedback that one area students really struggle with above all else is in the interpretation of the questions. As a result of this, we've included a section in our analysis that focuses on helping students answer the question that's actually asked of them, which may be worded slightly differently from the one they may have prepared for. We've seen that even where the question's been worded differently, it's the same content that makes up the answer, as it's still testing the same knowledge. So being prepared for a change of style in questioning really helps candidates not to panic when they read the actual question in the exam. They know they're prepared and can adapt their thinking to the question actually in front of them. Exam technique is another crucial area, especially for R06, where for a lot of people this will be the first written CII exam they've done, but we'll talk about that a bit later on. So the objectives of this session are to look at the structure of the exam to make sure you know what to expect, look at what a revision strategy might look like for those weeks leading up to when the case studies are released. We'll then spend some time looking at a selection of the typical exam questions that you'll face. Then we'll think about what to do once the case studies are released. And finally, we'll offer some tips on exam technique. Okay, so first, the structure of the exam. As I'm sure you're aware, the exam is 3 hours long and all questions are based on 2 case studies that you'll have access to approximately 2 weeks before the exam. The nominal pass mark for R06 is 55%, with 150 marks available in total, which are usually but not always split equally between the 2 case studies. This means you'll need at least 83 marks to pass. The exam will test your knowledge on elements of the financial planning process, which will be covered in the R06 study text, but you'll also need to be able to apply the knowledge you acquired from studying modules R01 through R05. So do be prepared to revise knowledge from those other exams in order to be fully prepared for R06. As we've been helping candidates with R06 by producing an analysis for every exam sitting for over 10 years, we have a very strong experience of the type of case studies likely to come up for your exam. To give you an idea of what to expect, we'll run through an example. There are 2 case studies. One example is of Jack and Jill, who are in their 30s and have 2 young children. The case study provides a detailed picture of their financial situation, along with a list of their assets, clearly showing who owns what. This can be really important information when analysing things such as tax efficiency. You are then given their objectives. The second case study will of course be focused on different individuals in a different time of life with a different financial situation. For example, it could be based on an older couple approaching retirement, giving a detailed picture of their financial situation, a list of their assets and their financial aims. Often it is the case that the first case study is a younger married couple with more of a protection need, and the second couple is an older married couple with more of a retirement or an IHT planning need. We can't, of course, guarantee that this is what will come up in your exam, so you do have to prepare for all eventualities. For example, there have been case studies where a client has either been widowed or divorced, and we occasionally get an unmarried partnership as well. So what does a revision strategy look like if we haven't had the case studies yet? Well, don't be misled into believing that there's no work to do until the case studies are released. There are areas of general revision where you can prepare beforehand so that you can then focus on the case studies as soon as they're released. The first thing to be clear about is the learning outcomes detailed in the syllabus. This gives you an overview of the exam and so are a good place to start to have a think about how the information within them might be tested. You can find case studies from previous exams on the R06 pages of the CII website. Learning Outcome 1 essentially covers the gathering of client information and understanding client needs and values, as well as risk profile. There are 4 sub-points within this learning outcome, which include the client-advisor relationship. The exam covers this learning outcome by asking questions on risk profile, which are fairly common, and the client-advisor relationship, which are not so common. Learning Outcome 2 continues with synthesising client information, so recognising any potential inconsistencies and identifying where additional information is needed. This is tested through the use of fact-finding questions. Learning Outcome 3 covers analysis of the client information and the advantages and disadvantages of different options. The focus here is on analysing a current situation, identifying gaps, and providing the pros and cons of a particular option. Learning Outcome 4 is all about formulating a financial plan and explaining and justifying the recommendations. Practice recommending and justifying a solution and explain any risks or limitations. The final outcome is around implementation and review, which is always covered, so do take a look at the R06 exam guides available on the CII website, as well as brand financial trainings analyses from past exams available on our R06 web pages. As we mentioned earlier, the way the exam questions are asked can often trip candidates up. Sometimes the wording can seem complicated or may not have been worded in the same way as the questions and answers that had been prepared in the lead up to the exam. This is why it's important that you truly understand the exam content so that you are able to apply your knowledge in whatever context is required in the exam. Within the exam though, there are some very standard questions that always get asked. These include the fact-finding question, which is a standard question asking you to identify the additional information you'd need to advise the clients on one of their stated aims, and we'll have a look at one of these questions in more detail shortly. Analysis questions are also very common. This could be a question asking you to identify any gaps in a client's situation, or it could be that you'd need to explain why their current fund choices might not be suitable for them. Factors questions are also increasingly common. With one of these, you'd be expected to identify the key factors an advisor would need to take into consideration to ensure a particular need is met, such as a protection need. Recommend and justify questions will also generally appear in each sitting, so recommending a particular product, for example, and then justifying why. A review question appears in most, if not all, exams, and again, it could be you'd need to identify the factors to consider when reviewing one aspect of their financial planning, such as inheritance tax or pensions. Finally, there will also be case study specific questions on technical subjects, so that could be wills or trusts, but in the main, this will be signposted clearly in the case study. So let's have a look at some examples. In each exam, there is a fact-finding question. It could be on any of the financial aims given in the case studies, so it's important to prepare in advance the questions you would need to ask the clients so you have all the information necessary to advise them. For example, you may be asked 2 fact-finding questions, such as to identify the additional information a financial advisor would require to advise Mark and Sarah on the suitability of their current pensions and investments. The question will tell you how many marks can be gained. Another might be to state the additional information a financial advisor would require to advise Mark on whether to surrender or retain his investment bond. Again, you'll be told how many marks can be gained in the question. So here, the first question includes all of their current investments, while the second one is specifically about one product. In the case study analysis that we prepare for you, we always provide a fact-finding question and model answer for each of the financial aims for both sets of clients. So let's look at how a model answer might look for the second question in this example. So here are the first few bullet points that form a model answer. It's an investment, so what would an advisor need to advise the client? Well, they'd need to know how much was invested and when, whether they'd topped it up with a further investment, and whether they'd taken any of the allowable 5% withdrawals. So that would be 4 of the 8 marks allocated to this question already. Even if someone hadn't been expecting this question, then their own experience and knowledge from R02 should get them at least half of the available marks. But what about the rest of the answer? The rest are to do with charges, asset allocation, fund choices, and whether it's in trust or not. Again, perhaps obvious answers regarding a fairly standard investment product. In each exam, there is also usually 1 or 2 factors questions, although we have sometimes seen more with a higher allocation of overall marks. So you need to be prepared for these in your exam. Practice, practice, and more practice is the tip here. Here's an example question. Which factors relating to Ben and Lucy's current circumstances should be taken into account by a financial advisor before recommending suitable protection products? As you can see here, this question's worth 10 marks in total. Don't let the word factors trouble you. It's simply asking, what about the client's circumstances do we need to take account of? In another sitting, the word issues was used instead of factors, but essentially it was asking the same thing. This is why having a knowledge of typical and past questions is important. Let's have a look at a model answer for this one. So you'd pull out from the case study the factors to take into account. One factor may be that Ben is the main breadwinner. You could state this in a different but equally valid way and still get a mark. For example, if you correctly stated Lucy works part-time or that she's dependent on Ben, you would get 1 mark. Another factor may be in relation to their health. The case study may explicitly tell us what their state of health is, for example, that they're both in good health. This is important for a protection type question, so don't forget to include it, and it is of course relevant for underwriting. The rest of the answer can be found by analysing the case study. For example, maybe there is no mention of income protection in the case study. Maybe they are due to take out a mortgage. All of these are important factors to take into account when looking at the same, so think logically and calmly and the answers will come to you. Recommend and justify questions have been very common in the past, although very occasionally you may find that there isn't a recommend and justify question. Regardless, you still need to be prepared. So as an example, and following on from the earlier factors example, this question is asking candidates to recommend and justify a suitable protection policy that could provide a regular income in the event of Ben suffering a long-term illness. And this is offering a total of 14 marks. Let's assume that the case study tells us that both Ben and his wife Lucy did not have any personal protection arrangements in place, but they wanted to ensure their family was protected in the event of death or long-term illness. This is a good signpost that this question might be asked. So let's have a look at a model answer. Firstly, you would identify the product as income protection with a term to match either an age or normal retirement date, with the justification for the product being that it provides tax-free income. You'd then recommend how the product would be set up, so for example, use of own occupation definition and providing the widest level of cover. Deferred periods and guaranteed premiums would also be part of the model answer. Basically, include all the detail that you know about income protection. The key is to remember to recommend and then justify, as there will be marks available for both. There could be other answers, such as including indexation with the justification that cover would then keep pace with inflation. Other points could be that underwriting is simple as Ben was in good health, and you could also state that the policy cannot be cancelled by the insurer, so Ben could make multiple claims. The review question usually appears at the end of one of the case studies and relates to one of the aims you will have been given for either set of clients. So this could focus on a number of areas, but the common areas we see are IHT planning, retirement planning, or a review of investments. Almost every R06 paper has a review question of this type, and it's usually worth around 8 marks. An example question is where candidates are asked to state 8 factors that an advisor should take into account when reviewing David and Ellen's financial arrangements at their next annual review meeting. The case study will provide some background, for example, that David and Ellen are in their late 70s and 2 of their financial aims are to ensure they have enough income throughout retirement and to make sure their savings and investments are suitable. So although this question on its own seems wide, it will be referring to specific aspects of the case study. So let's see what a model answer might look like for this question. There will be generic points in here that could apply to any review question in any R06 exam. Things like personal circumstances, financial circumstances, and certainly around new products and legislative changes. These should be included in most answers to this type of question. The other answers would need to relate to the client's circumstances. In this example, as it's focused on investments, then we can see here that attitude to risk, use of ISA allowances, and charges are relevant factors. The review question really should be easy marks. We know that in almost all exams it will appear, and we know that half the marks could be generic and the other half are related to clients in the case study. So once you've got a handle on the types of questions you'll be faced with, it's now time to practice. It is crucial to do this. You need to know that you can complete the exam in 3 hours. So lock yourself in a room, set the timer for 3 hours and complete a past paper. These can be found on the R06 page of the CII website called Exam Guides, and these have been written by the senior examiner. Once you've finished, you can compare your answers with the model answer that's also within the exam guide. This will give you a really good idea as to whether you interpreted the question properly and that your answer was detailed enough for the marks on offer. Make sure you notice where you could have done better and ensure you related your answers as much as possible to the information in the case study. The case studies are usually released by the CII on a Friday. The exam will then be just over 2 weeks from then, and that 2-week clock will start to tick quite loudly. Starting your preparation on the day the case studies are released does usually give the advantage of another weekend. But essentially, you've got 2 weeks to really get to know the two sets of clients. Try and bring them to life in your mind, as the more realistic that you can make them, the easier you'll find recalling knowledge in the exam. The case studies will include the financial aims of the client, so consider these in full and think of any other possible areas that could be tested. Now's the time to make 100% sure that your technical knowledge is up to speed. Make a list of the subjects in the case studies and think about how strong your knowledge is in each area. So for example, if we're told a client has a child with a disability, now's the time to make sure you know the ins and outs of trusts for vulnerable beneficiaries. There may be the odd curveball in the exam, but the majority of questions can be predicted from the case studies. Calculations rarely, if ever, appear in the R06 exam. However, it is important that you understand the taxes that will affect them and whether they'll be basic, higher or additional rate taxpayers. If it looks like a client may have an inheritance tax problem, make sure you know roughly what that is. After the CII released the case studies, here at Brand Financial Training, we get started on our analysis of the case studies. This has helped thousands of candidates over the years to pass R06. It's written by our highly qualified and experienced technical team and is released to our customers 5 calendar days after the CII releases the fact find, but earlier if possible. The analysis package, which also includes an essential email support day, within 48 hours after the support day is concluded, our analysis customers will be provided with a question and answer document that shares the answers to all the useful questions posed by their peers on email support day. With over 10 years of experience writing R06 analyses for thousands of exam candidates, we have a long and proven track record of helping people pass the exam. It's not an easy exam, so getting all the help you can is advisable. Our analysis document for each sitting includes everything you see here. The first thing we do is make a note of the key facts from each case study and our initial thoughts. So here we're picking out key facts such as age, health status, types of planning they have in place already. For example, if they're older clients, perhaps their health condition may prompt a question on long-term care or putting a power of attorney in place. We then carefully consider each of the financial aims and provide our expected questions and model answers. These are based on our knowledge and expertise on over 10 years of R06 papers. We will include each of the question styles we mentioned earlier, along with the technical areas we feel might be tested as well. Our analysis is provided in bullet point format, so it's easy to read and revise from, and we provide information in tables where we think that's helpful too. We have a whole section on exam technique which reminds you to use bullet points, state the obvious, and help with the use of abbreviations. We also provide a section on past papers which shows the types of questions that have been asked in previous exam sittings, so you can see how many times a fact-finding question was asked, as well as other types of questions that come up. We also provide a full breakdown of exactly what was tested in previous exam papers, so this includes the subject areas. We have a generic question section which includes different product areas and technical knowledge that we feel might be relevant to that particular sitting. We include this because whilst the majority of marks available for each case study should be directly related to the client's stated aims, you are likely to face some questions that test your understanding of the financial planning process and technical areas, so the generic section is designed to cover these. And finally, we provide a section of self-test questions related to the case studies. This provides valuable practice and a reminder that the questions in the actual exam paper may be worded differently, but the model answer can be just as relevant and valid. We also provide a very highly regarded email support day, and this comes as part of our case study analysis and is scheduled for a few days before the exam. From 9 until 5 on the email support day, our very experienced technical team will be available to answer any questions you may have based on the case studies and our analysis. For example, helping someone with a technical question on a type of trust or pension, or perhaps explaining why a certain product isn't relevant in a recommend and justify question. Any questions emailed to us up until 5 on the email support day will be answered that day. Do bear in mind though that if you email us just before 5 or if it's been an exceptionally busy day, you might receive your response later that evening. Then within 48 hours, we'll email to you the useful questions with our answers that were asked of us during the email support day, so you'll also benefit from the questions of others. I should also point out that if you pre-order our analysis before it's released, which is usually 5 days after the CII releases the case studies, but sometimes sooner, there is a special pre-order price and full details can be found on our website. So you've done all your preparation and the day has finally arrived and your exam is in a few hours. It's probably true to say for most of us that doing any kind of last minute cramming only adds to any exam nerves that might already be being experienced. What you can do though is remember this. Structure your answer using bullet points. It really is perfectly acceptable to the examiner. They would much rather be marking bullet points than trying to pick out the key points from pages and pages of sentences. Don't use too much jargon, but also don't worry too much about abbreviating very common terms. Things like IHT, CGT can very obviously be used, but even CLT and PETs will be acceptable to examiners. The CII actually provides a glossary of abbreviations at the back of their exam guide that you can use in financial planning online exams, so do make sure you have a look at them. Remember to state the obvious, things like stating they're in good health for protection type questions or that one is a basic rate taxpayer and one is a higher rate taxpayer. Sometimes it's the obvious information we forget to write down. Use the number of marks available as an indicator of how many points you should be making. An 8-mark question needs 8 different points to gain the marks available. If you can think of more, write them down. This might mean 8 separate bullet points, or sometimes 2 marks might be within one sentence. But do remember, if a question is for 3 marks, a full page answer will be a waste of your valuable time. And if a question is for 12 marks, then you'll probably need more than a couple of bullet points. That probably goes without saying, but it's surprising how many candidates sometimes don't pay attention to the marks on offer. Finally, remember there's no negative marking within any CII written exam. What this means is that marks are not taken away for incorrect information. What you must be careful of though is hedging. This is where candidates give more than one answer, which might even be contradictory, but they're hoping that one of them is right. In these circumstances, the examiner is unlikely to give you the mark, even though one of those answers might be right, because they need to be confident that you do actually know what the answer is. This is a good time to also make you aware of our R06 How to Pass guide, which is freely available on our website. This takes you through the structure of R06, how you can prepare yourself to pass, and how to master the types of questions asked. I know we've already said this, but this is one of the biggest tips we can give you about exam technique, and that is to answer the question being asked. It really is the area that trips up candidates more than anything else in R06. And here's a prime example from a previous R06 exam. The question was, state the key factors that a financial advisor should take into consideration before recommending a fund switch within Trisha's holding as part of her employer's qualifying workplace pension scheme. In the examiner's comments, it was stated that candidates focused on the transfer of the pension scheme rather than a fund switch, as stated clearly in the question. So the big tip here is to take time and read and understand the question, then ensure you answer the question being asked. Before you even get close to the exam date, it's worth making sure you are familiar with the CII online system for written exams. Although calculations are very rare within the exam, it's also worth making sure you know where the calculator is on screen, just in case you do want to use one. Remember as well to type in the full number of the question you are answering. Do take a look at the CII's online familiarisation test for written exams. It's not for an R06 exam, but you can ignore that. The idea is to give you a good feel for the layout, and it's well worth doing. For the full details on the system, have a look at the CII website. The exact link is here on the screen. So today we've looked at the structure of the exam to make sure you know what to expect. We've looked at what a revision strategy might look like for those weeks leading up to when the case studies are released. We've spent some time looking at a selection of the typical exam questions that you'll face. We've thought about what needs to be done once the case studies are released. And finally, we've offered some tips on exam technique. Thank you so much for joining me today, and I really hope you found this video useful. As a reminder, you can order our case study analysis with our email support date by going to brandft.info/R06-full analysis, or by going to our website and accessing the CII exams menu at the top and selecting R06. You can also access a free taster version of our analysis from a previous sitting to get a feel for it. You may also want to download our free How to Pass guide. This is a PDF document which includes lots of useful hints and tips for passing the R06 exam, and within it you'll find some of the key content from this video. Good luck with your exam, and do let us know how you get on.